and welcome, my friends and viewers, to this week's episode of Legendlore, where I draw and talk about monsters, characters, gods, and other things from D&D 5th edition, all while giving you a small but quickly digestible history about them. Together we go over their origins within the game, how they're utilized in the modern edition, and how you guys can utilize them in your own games. This week we will be looking at the Ranger, a class that is the subject of one of the most divisive arguments of overall usefulness and niche in the tabletop space. But before we get to addressing the great subject that is the strength and viability of the Ranger, let's take it easy and go over some of the basic mechanics. And yes, this will include all the fixes and optional rules from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything that was added to the class, since we want to keep everyone informed on the class's most recent iteration. And this way you can choose to build your Ranger the way that you want to, or whatever the DM will allow you. At level 1, you get Favored Enemy, whereupon you choose a creature type to be extremely good at killing. The list includes aberrations, beasts, celestials, constructs, dragons, elementals, fae, fiends, giants, monstrosities, oozes, plants, or undead. Or you can instead choose 2 races of humanoids such as halflings or goblins. But whichever one you pick, the 2 bonuses that you get against your chosen prey include having advantage on survival checks to track them, and on intelligence checks to recall information about them, as well as learning one language of your choice that is spoken by your chosen creature type, if they speak one at all. Rangers can further grow their expertise on hunting monsters that they encounter as the campaign goes on, choosing an additional favorite enemy at level 6 and 14. On the flip side, you may also decide to choose the Favored Foe optional feature from Tasha's, which replaces the Favored Enemy feature and works with the Foe Slayer feature that we'll go over in a few minutes. With Favored Foe, whenever you would successfully hit a creature with an attack roll of any kind, be it magical or melee, you can mark the target as your favored enemy for 1 minute. This marking is treated as a concentration effect and ends if you fail a concentration check to maintain it. While this mark is applied, each first successful hit you make against the enemy on your turn deals an additional 1d4 damage and increases to 1d6 at 6th level and 1d8 at 14th level, and you are able to mark an enemy using Favored Foe a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest. This option is a particularly good replacement for those who wish to play a more versatile Ranger without risking their usefulness if their DM decides to not use their favorite enemy. However, you do sacrifice the bonuses of information and tracking in favor of straight damage, and can lose out a little bit on the backstory flavor of your Ranger as to why they hunt these creatures and why they may be their favorite enemies. It all really depends on your playstyle. Also in level 1, you get Natural Explorer, which is basically favorite enemy except with terrain. You choose from either Arctic, coast, desert, grassland, forest, mountain, swamp, or the Underdark. And when you make an intelligence or wisdom check related to your favorite terrain, your proficiency bonus is considered doubled for that skill that you are using, so long as you are proficient in it. Additionally, you and your party gain the following benefits if you're traveling within your chosen terrain for more than an hour. Difficult terrain does not slow down your group's travel. Your group cannot become lost except by magical means, even when you're engaged in another activity while traveling, such as foraging, navigating, tracking, or whatever. You remain alert to danger. I don't know what this means mechanically, but I personally believe that it gives you a bonus to perception or initiative or something like that that would be viable. If you're traveling alone, you can move stealthy at a normal pace. When you forage, you find twice as much food as you normally would, and while tracking other creatures, you also learn their exact number, their sizes, and how long ago they passed through this area. And you may collect additional favorite terrains at level 6 and 10, which should be informed by the terrains you've been going through in your campaign. Like Favorite Enemy, Natural Explorer comes with the optional role that you can switch to something called Deft Explorer. With Deft Explorer, you gain access to the Canny class feature, which allows you to choose one of your skill proficiencies and double the proficiency bonus for that skill. You can also speak, read, and write 2 additional languages of your choice, which makes up for the languages that you would lose upon choosing Favorite Foe over Favorite Enemy. Additionally, Deft Explorer also gives you the Roving feature at 6th level and the Tireless feature at 10th level. Roving increases your walking speed by 5 feet while also giving you a climb and swim speed equal to your walking speed, and Tireless allows you to give yourself a number of temporary hit points equal to 1d8 plus your wisdom modifier, as an action. And you can do this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest. I simply like to think of it as a less effective form of the second wind from Fighter. Additionally, Tireless lets you heal 1 level of exhaustion if you have any when you finish a short rest, rather than a long rest. Once again, the variant feature sacrifices the Ranger's flavor to focus more on general usefulness, and you once again can make the same choice as you did with Favorite Enemy. If you personally feel like you want more control over the strength of your Ranger, rather than leaving it in the DM's hands, I would say go with the optional features over the normal vanilla ones. It relieves a lot of stress in risking picking a creature type that's not going to appear, or an environment that you're not going to go through. But likewise, if you like that risk or trust your DM enough to be able to take care of it, then try out the base options. At second level, the Ranger can choose a fighting style just as the Paladin and the Fighter, which allows you to better hew the Ranger to your personal style of play. Whether you like to focus on melee combat or keep yourself at range. You also get spellcasting at level 2, using your Wisdom as your casting ability score, and it is important to note that Rangers are not prepared spellcasters. The spells that you pick are the only spells that you know and can cast for the remainder of the campaign. But you can always change out one spell for a different one each time that you level up. This is in addition to any new spells you learn upon leveling up. And as with all spellcasters, your spell attack modifier is your proficiency bonus plus your wisdom modifier, and your spell save DC is that same exact number plus 8. At level 3, you finally get to choose your Ranger archetype subclass, and you are able to choose from the Beastmaster, the Drake Warden, the Fey Wanderer, the Gloomstalker, the Horizon Walker, the Hunter, the Monster Slayer, and the Swarm Keeper. We'll go over each of these subclasses and a few interesting ways as to how you can flavor them later on in the video, but you get your additional ability from your subclass at levels 7, 11, and 15. At level 3, you also get access to the Primeval Awareness feature, which allows you to use your action to expend a Ranger spell slot to gain the following benefit. To start, you choose one of the following creature types: Aberration, Celestials, Dragons, Elementals, Fae, Fiends, and Undead. Then, for 1 minute per level of the spell slot that you spend, you can sense whether they are present within 1 mile of you, or up to 6 miles if you're within your favorite terrain. Using this feature does not reveal the creature's actual location or the number of creatures present. And as with past class abilities, you can swap out Primeval Awareness with Tasha's Primal Awareness. That could be a little bit confusing, but this simply gives the Ranger a number of spells that they can cast that don't count against your spells known. You still need Ranger spell slots to cast them, but you can now be a little bit more liberal with your spell selection. These spells and the levels that you get them are Speak with Animals at 3rd level, Beast Sense at 5th level, Speak with Plants at 9th level, Locate Creature at 13th level, and Commune with Nature at 17th level. Furthermore, you can cast each of these spells once per long rest without spending a spell slot, but it will be cast at its traditional spell level. At level 4, Rangers can choose to increase one ability score by 2 or 2 ability scores by 1, or they may choose a feat if your DM allows feats at their game. This happens again at levels 8, 12, 16, and 19. Level 5 grants the Ranger extra attack, allowing them to make 2 attack rolls instead of 1 when they take the attack action. At 8th level, you get Land Stride, which lets you ignore the movement penalty caused by difficult terrain so long as it's not magical, and you can also pass through non-magical plants without being slowed or taking damage from them if they have thorns or other hazards. If the plant does end up being magical, you have advantage on any saving throws that these magical plants may enforce upon you, only in regards to slowing movement, however. At 10th level, you have the Hide in Plain Sight feature, which allows you to spend 1 minute to create camouflage using natural materials such as mud, plants, and the like, and doing so before hiding against a solid surface gives you a +10 to stealth checks while remaining there. But once you move, take an action, or a reaction, you must spend 1 minute reapplying the camouflage to do it again. I personally do not find this to be a really useful feature and rather opt for Tasha's replacement for it, Nature's Veil, where as a bonus action, you can magically become invisible until the start of your next turn. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and as usual, you regain all uses of it when you finish a long rest. Nature's Veil to me is a much more useful feature between the two, as turning invisible as a bonus action is immensely useful in combat to either disengage or evade the sight of the enemy. Plus, in my table, I feel a player can just perform the actions of Hide and Play Sight as a skill check or something, and then I can just give them a comparable bonus. At 14th level, you get the Vanish feature, which allows you to use the Hide action as a bonus action, and makes it so you can't be tracked by non-magical means unless you intentionally decide to leave a trail. A good use for abilities like these that I never see people actually use is if you and your party have the jump on a group of enemies, create a trail that's false and lead these enemies into an ambush that you and the party set up. The enemy can't track your actual trail anyway, so why not use it to dupe scouting parties or even lone guards? Finally, at 18th level, you get Feral Senses, which negates the disadvantage you get on attacks against creatures you can't see, and allows you to be immediately aware of any invisible creatures that are within 30 feet of you, so long as they aren't in cover or you aren't blind or deaf. Then beyond that, you have Foe Slayer at level 20, which lets you add your Wisdom modifier to the attack roll or damage roll made against any one of your favorite enemies. You can only do this once on each of your turns, and this can be stacked with uses of favorite foe. And while it's not exactly a game-breaking capstone like those of the Paladin subclasses, I personally feel that it really drives home the idea of you being a Master Ranger hunting down your specialized prey. This can also be used on spell attacks and spell damage rolls as well, so do keep that in mind when using attacking spells such as Lightning Arrow or even Ensnaring Strike. Now, the subclasses for Ranger help cover a variety of environments and interactions with a variety of different creatures, but the classic starting point is, of course, the Beastmaster. The simple Dritz Duerden and Guinevere pairing, the Ranger and their animal companion traveling the world, saving people and surviving through the bonds of friendship. While you can make use of the Ranger's original selection of beasts, I personally recommend using Tasha's Primal Companion optional rule. It allows you to flavor whatever companion you wish to travel with you on top of the Beast of Sky, Sea, or Land stat blocks, both of which are very solid and scale with your spell attack bonus. If regular animals aren't your style, you could always take on the Drake Warden, which sees you raise a dragon-adjacent beast, and share the benefits of that creature, getting breath weapons, resistance to certain forms of damage, and eventually being able to ride that same Drake as it turns into a large size. It is a bit of a shame that it can't fly though, unless one of your spellcasters casts a spell Fly on it, then you're golden. The Fey Wanderer departs a little bit from the animal companion focus and changes more about where you are as a ranger rather than what you hunt. You can summon Fey to come to your aid, are naturally resistant against attacks that affect your emotions, and are able to kind of prance in and out of the Feywild at almost your entirely own leisure. Just be careful not to get stuck there, and if you do, don't get stuck in the wrong court. The Gloomstalker is the Night Hunter of the Rangers, often believed to be solely focused on the Underdark, but that's not exactly true. Gloomstalkers focus on using the night and keeping to the shadows and using darkness to surprise their prey, setting up ambushes, kiting their enemies, and dodging attacks using both natural and supernatural obscurity. The Horizon Walker, or the Tank Ranger as I like to call it, is all about facing threats from beyond the material plane. Their spells explicitly defend against extraplanar threats and focus on maneuverability and damage output, as well as the ability to grant themselves resistance against attacks on the fly at higher levels. Rangers that are voyaging into Avernus, the Feywild, or the deep reaches of the Far Realm should really pick up this subclass. The Hunter Ranger, to me, is actually a lot like the Battlemaster Fighter, in that rather than have the subclass be what decides your skills and benefits, you build up your Ranger as you level up. You can select from a bucket of usually 2 to 4 different types of abilities depending on your level, each focusing on either attacking multiple foes, taking down stronger singular foes, or defending against some conditional effects that enemies might force upon you. It may not be exactly as flashy as any of the other subclasses, but it is extremely effective and is personally one of my favorite Ranger subclasses. The Monster Slayer takes the seat of the Anti-Magic Ranger, focusing on building powerful attacks against those who cast spells as well as monsters who can use supernatural abilities, resisting their effects, and being literally dedicated towards stopping magic users from teleporting away or casting their spells. I personally love to use reskin Monster Slayers as Inquisitors for my game, who are anti-magic and hunting the party spellcasters for one reason or another, as the party may expect a counterspell, but they may not expect a Monster Slayer Ranger. And finally, we have the Swarm Keeper, which is the class I'm actually depicting over here with my PC, Monera, a Dampfire Ranger whose swarm is a small collection of vampire bats. The Swarm Keeper takes the idea of a ranger having a singular big companion and breaks it down into you having a group of smaller, weaker companions. The class itself gives examples of twig blights, pixies, and even a nest of birds, but these aren't the only ones that you can pick. Like, could you imagine a ranger with a swarm of greater death butterflies from the Tome of Peace? Your swarm eventually becomes a literal part of you, and you can teleport, fly about, and disperse your swarm in order to mitigate damage. And once again, this is another personal favorite subclass of mine. I personally feel like I've driven home the idea of what the Ranger is supposed to represent, and I want to go over a few of the problems that people usually see or feel that inhibits the Ranger. Many believe that it would be better off as a druid or a fighter subclass, or that the current ranger subclasses are really stretched thin for flavor. Others believe that the ranger was entirely unviable until Tasha's Cauldron of Everything added better optional rules. Or you can only use the revised ranger version to have any hope of being useful in the game. While I won't say that D&D isn't a game about being useful, everybody wants to be cool and do high damage and always hit and all that kind of stuff, the ranger is a classic fantasy archetype that I believe deserves its spot as a class. It is the bridge between the natural world and the material world in a way that the druid isn't. The druid is someone who has thrown themselves into the natural world and allows themselves to be its vessel, almost consumed by it. The ranger, on the other hand, is someone who works alongside nature, treats it as an equal, and is something that should be respected and should also respect them. That, in my opinion, is how you should look at the ranger when making one in D&D. Why does your ranger hunt the way it does? What does it hunt? What tools do they use, and who do they have to ally themselves with in order to achieve their goals? Finding answers to these questions is what's going to make your character identity that much easier to embody, and can even aid you in coming up with a backstory, personal arc, or missions for them to undertake during your campaign. Now I'm going to get off my soapbox and return to the mechanical side of things. Here are a few feats that are incredibly useful for ranger builds. Mobile is very good for kiting and avoiding attacks of opportunity while dancing about the battlefield. Skilled and Dungeon Delver are good for those who want to supplant a rogue in their party as the Skill Monkey or the Trap Disarmer. Defensive Duelist for those who are wielding 2 weapons and want to get some cool AC benefits. Alert is really good for the initiative bonus at the start of combat to get that first shot off. Mage Slayer for those Monster Slayer Rangers who want to keep on bullying their spellcasters further. And lastly, Skulker for those who wish to spend combat fighting at a distance without exposing their position to the enemy. Obviously, these aren't the only feats that you can choose, but these are the ones that I personally believe are the most useful. For useful magic items that DMs can bestow upon their players, I highly recommend using the always useful Arrow of Slaying. Dropping one of these into the hands of your players will guarantee that your ranger player hyper-focuses on whatever creature you attach the arrow statistics to. For instance, if you have a quest that the players have been ignoring but they know it has to deal with a dragon, drop an arrow of dragon slaying in front of them, and you'll immediately see the ranger want to make a hard right to go and slay that dragon and claim its hoard. Beyond that, other items include Boots of False Tracks, Boots and Cloaks of Elvenkind, Defending Weapons, Scimitars of Speed, Boots of Striding and Springing, Enchanted Arrows and Poisons to dip their arrows in, Hunter's Coats for extra necrotic damage to their attacks, Animated Shields, Sentinel Shields, Scrolls of Protection, especially against foes that aren't the ranger's favorite enemy, Cloaks of Displacement, the Nature's Mantle Cloak from Tasha's, and Moon Sickles, which interestingly enough is one of the only weapons that can be used by rangers as a spellcasting focus. And finally, for our homebrew magic item this evening, we have the Giving Quiver. This item requires attunement, and when a ranger puts an arrow of a magical type into its quiver, the Quiver then duplicates it, so that there are now 2 rather than 1. The Quiver only does this once for any magical arrow that is put into it, and does not do so again if the arrow has already benefited from this effect. This includes the duplicate arrow. And additionally, it always has 1 normal arrow inside of it at all times, so the ranger is never left without an arrow to defend themselves. This item is admittedly a little bit simple, but I feel that it allows rangers a little bit more freedom in being able to use their arrows more freely, rather than hoarding all of them until one big fight when they spend all uses of every single one. It can also help avoid the issue of the ranger counting their arrows as they shoot, and while I know that most DMs usually homebrew that away, giving the ranger an item that specifically does that will make them feel a lot more special. It's a little bit more of that DM sleight of hand. I've included the item stat block in the description below. And there we have the Ranger, everybody, and it's certainly a very divisive class, but one that I feel deserves a lot more credit and interest than it currently has. I want to thank all of you guys for watching, and if you guys want to see more videos like this one, please like, share, and subscribe, and comment down below about the Rangers that you guys have played in your games. And if you want to vote on the next Legendlore, please click the link down in the description. This week, it'll be Gods, with you choosing between the Red Knight, Celestian the Far Wanderer, and Jergal the Scribe of the Dead. Also, please let me know what other things you guys would like to see in upcoming videos. But until then, I'll see you guys next time.